Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Bound to Talk Football. I am your host, Blake Walker. I am alone tonight, or this morning, or this afternoon when you are listening to this podcast. We're getting this out on Wednesday because I really wanted to get our schedule straightened out that we could have Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That way, we're not Monday, Thursday, Friday kind of shoves everything together. I am alone today, this afternoon, if you might have guessed, because I have not introduced a co host. Paul is currently sick. So he said he had a terrible migraine, sounded terrible. He just wanted to take the night off. I don't blame him. Might as well get your rest up while you can. So I'll just be running the show tonight. It's our midweek episode. So you know what that means. We get questions, hot takes, predictions. We're not getting as many questions. We're getting a lot of hot takes and predictions. That's completely fine. Most of what I've grabbed are hot takes, predictions, what you have. Also, we're going to talk about the rankings. We're going to talk about the rankings first that came out thanks to the Iowa High School Athletic Association. Released those on Monday. I guess I was kind of confused. I thought it said RPI and rankings coming out. Obviously, 2A through 8 player don't have RPI. 3A, 4A, 5A do have RPI. So I just thought RPI was coming out. RPI did not come out. RPI comes out next week. Basically, these rankings are the official rankings. These are what us at Bound will be going by the rest of the way. I know we have our power index, but these will be what we go by through the rest of the season. I know the AP poll will still be a thing. The Iowa radio poll will still be a thing. And those are great. It's always good to have multiple polls. But these are what we're going to be going by. If you don't know how it works, basically the association brought in 4 guys per class to look at and evaluate the structure or who should be ranked where. So it's not just one guy going through it. Jason Esslinger does that for the girls union, and he's absolutely amazing at it. So the girls union in that case go with one person. Jason does a great job. The boys association, football is a big deal. Not that any other sport isn't a big deal, but the boys have brought on 4 guys per class, 2A, 1A, 8 player. I don't have their names pulled up right now. Maybe I can grab it here while I'm multitasking, but that's the problem when I don't have Paul with me. But either way, I can talk about him later. We can bring him up later. All I know is Jeff Linder's on the poll. I don't know if Jeff listened to these podcasts, but Jeff, I listen to your guys' podcast with the Gazette when you do them. Jeff is on the Class A staff. I think how it works is it's like either 2 coaches, 1 media member, and then something else or something like that. Again, I'll look into it more once we get into RPI. Paul and I will talk about it next week. But anyway, 4 guys, 4 classes, 4 guys per class. So you're getting a good chunk of people looking at this and knowing what they're talking about. And the fact that they're only dedicated to one class means that they're doing their research and they're not just, looking at stats and saying, all right, we know what's talking about. So we'll start with the rankings. Why not? We did a post on them on Bound. I'm going to say a couple things about them. I agree with most of them for the most part. I haven't heard a lot of people say any other things, but we'll just kind of roll with it. We'll start in Class 2A. Central Lyon is the number 1 team. I didn't really see this as a surprise. I think you can say Van Meter's just as good, and I think they are just as good, but Central Lyon is just a little bit better. Clearly have not missed a beat despite losing Zach Letmer. Reese Vanderzee has been phenomenal. They're blowing out everybody they're facing. They get a tough test with West Lyon here in a couple weeks, but the Lions have been nothing short of amazing, and they should remain the number 1 team as long as they go unblemished if they do. So they sit at number 1. Van Meter's at number 2. No surprise. They're sitting right behind them. West Lyon at number 3. West Lyon has really picked things up this season. They will get Central Lyon here in a couple weeks where we will get a definitive. That's the big one. So if West Lyon beats Central Lyon, does West Lyon jump Van Meter in the polls? I would think so. That's a good question. You are probably maybe thinking to yourself an answer at home while you're listening. I'd be curious to know, but just let me know. I'd be curious. I don't know. It's one of those things that you're like, has what Van Meter done be really well? I mean, what does Van Meter have to do with anything? Granted, Van Meter's schedule has not been as great. They did beat Underwood to start the year, and Underwood looks like they will be one of the top contenders down in Class 1A when it comes to the Dome. We'll talk about that in a second. But Van Meter at number 2, West Lyon at 3. If West Lyon beats Central Lyon, do they move up to number 1? Let me know. Or does Van Meter just slip up to number 1? You never know, because you'll have 2 undefeated teams right there at the top. Monticello at number 4. I feel like we have just completely forgotten about Monticello. They lost to Mount Vernon in week 1. Preston Rees is still an unbelievable player. They lost to a 3A Mount Vernon team. What are you going to do? I mean, they just didn't look good in that game, but Mount Vernon's a very good team. They are at number 4. I like that spot. Western Christian at number 5. Just lost to West Lyon, but I think they're still a very tremendous football team. I like them at that 5th spot. We got Spirit Lake at number 6. I was very high on Spirit Lake to start the season. I can't remember who they lost to early, but have picked things up again. They're a very talented core. Kemper Catholic at 7-2, or is at 7, excuse me. They are 3-2. We get a couple 3-2 teams. 2A is pretty top heavy when you think about it, but Kemper Catholic is at number 7. They're a talented team. I think they deserve their ranking. Clarinda is at 8, another very good team. Their losses are to Trainer, who is up, obviously, in class, or is in class 1A, excuse me. Lost to Trainer, who is a class 1A team. They are at number 8. I really like that spot. Tipton, who just lost to Comanche, who was undefeated at the time. Tipton was undefeated. They sit at number 9. Tipton was probably the biggest one that had everybody up in a rile. Was just a lot of people weren't happy that Tipton was there. Their strength of schedule is little to none. But, you know, they're 5-0, dropped to 4-1. I get it. They lost, but I still think they should be a top 10 team. I think they should still sit there. A couple PCM guys were pretty mad that PCM wasn't up there. I just didn't see a lot from PCM's schedule. I think you could easily slip them in where Tipton's at, but I just, you know, PCM, they could easily fit right back in. I'm not saying they shouldn't be there, but that's why I'm not on the committee for Class 2A. And then Des Moines Christian, Tate Platt, and the Lions of Des Moines Christian coming at number 10. Des Moines Christian plays Kemper Catholic this week. Should be a good game. That's our Class 2A game of the week. So that's your Class 2A rankings. We'll jump down to Class 1A, where Grundy Center remains the number 1 team. I don't see that changing anytime soon. Really had one close game against Dike New Hartford, and that's it. So take that as you will. They've looked good ever since. I don't see any reason they slip up. Underwood is at number 2. Their only loss coming to Van Meter. They have since then run through all their opponents. They get Trainer, who we'll talk about here in a second this week, where I believe Underwood should win that game. Statistically, it just favors Underwood a lot. Trainer's a good team, don't get me wrong, but Underwood has just played a much tougher schedule. Regina at number 3. A lot of people aren't talking about Regina, but solid game, solid start here for Regina Catholic, the Regals. Again, their strength of schedule is not great, but they have chances to figure it out. I think they could sneak right back into the dome. Denver at number 4. We all know I've been very high on the Cyclones. They get Sumner Fredericksburg this week, who is at number 5. We'll really figure out a lot about these two teams. I think we already know Sumner Fredericksburg is very good. They beat an MFL Marmac team that, granted, did not have the greatest strength of schedule. Take that as you will. It was a close game. We'll really figure out what Micah Greer in Denver is made out of at this week against Davis Van Sickle and that Sumner Fredericksburg team. That is a very, very good game. Trainer at number 6. We have our 1A Class 1A game of the week is Underwood versus Trainer. We could have gone Denver versus Sumner Fredericksburg. It's our fan favorite game of the week. We don't pick it, but it's still there. So we gave it acknowledgement. Trainer, good team. Has to prove a little bit more here. Snuck away barely last week against AHSTW. Got to come out strong against Underwood. MFL Marmac slips up in their first true test of the year. They go to 7. Pella Christian, really a big surprise for everyone, sitting at 4-1. They are at the 8 spot. Wilton, another undefeated team we have not talked about. Not a great strength of schedule. The committee, obviously, of 4 guys recognizes that and puts them at number 9. And then, in my opinion, one of the most dangerous teams in Class 1A that is so under the radar is Dike New Hartford at number 10. They are 3-2, but they're the best 3-2 team in the state of Iowa. I think Dike New Hartford could easily get to the dome. That's how good that defense is, and the offense is starting to click as well. Class A rankings. St. Ansgar at the top. No surprise here. Beat West Hancock. They look good. I think they're going to be fine. Woodbury Central at number 2. Look good. Drew Kluender, whole team, everything. Look like they got the full package back. They're going to be back to the dome, no problem. West Hancock at number 3. Despite losing to St. Ansgar, West Hancock is put above of Madrid. Madrid is at number 4. Madrid is undefeated and realistically has played a good schedule all year. Like, they have wins over good teams, but the committee sees them at number 4. I think eye test goes into a huge part of this. And if we're looking and thinking of eye test and not just statistical outbeat, I would say I agree with Madrid at number 4. I think eye test wise, St. Ansgar, Woodbury Central, and West Hancock are better than Madrid, but we'll only get time will tell. This is such an interesting class because I feel like the top 3, St. Ansgar, Woodbury Central, and West Hancock, I'd almost say they're locks for the Dome. But that 4th spot could be given to anybody the rest of the way. And that's really, really interesting to me. That's how we're going to see this the rest of the way. But I don't know. There's a couple more surprises, I guess, down the line, I guess. ACGC comes in at number 5. In our power index on Bound, which I don't like talking about a ton because it's flawed in its ways, ACGC is number 1. It sounds crazy, but their schedule has not been that bad. They've beaten pretty good teams. I know they want more respect. They can earn it. Just keep winning. You're going to be fine. Lenville Sully at number 6. I like this spot. I think, their only loss is to Madrid. They don't have their quarterback, or they don't have their man quarter down harder. Supposed to be back for the playoffs. We'll see what happens there. I think they could easily shoot right back up and be that 4th team in. Lisbon, undefeated at 5-0. They are at number 7. Another one of those teams that just has not played that strength of schedule. Has struggled a little bit, but just win, baby. You'll get there. Just win. Wapsie Valley at 8. I really like this one. They've lost to Denver. Denver's a higher class 1A. Wapsie Valley's a good team. Nashua Plainfield, same thing. Very good team. Lake Mills. We'll talk about Lake Mills a little bit later. We had a question about Lake Mills, so I won't go into too much, but Lake Mills is undefeated, and they're number 10 in the state. They will get tested heavily in the next 3 weeks. Let's just say that. But Lake Mills sneaks in at number 10. We'll jump down to Class 8-player rankings. Good luck ranking these teams because this class is so stacked, and I love it. Winfield Mount Union is the number 1 team. I get it. I understand this one. Offensively, they are a juggernaut led by their man. I think Cam Buffington is phenomenal. We've said that time and time again on this podcast. Winfield Mount Union gets number 1. I think it's a toss-up. You could literally flip a coin. Gladbrook Rhinebeck is number 2. Gladbrook Rhinebeck has a win over Don Bosco, who is at number 6. We'll talk about them in a second, but Gladbrook Rhinebeck's defense has been so good. They gave up 21 to Don Bosco, and ever since then, they've only given up 8 points. So that's all you need to know about Gladbrook Rhinebeck. Isaac Clark is a phenomenal quarterback. They get a tough test here this week against a tougher opponent. I'll get to that here in a second because I think we had a question about it. But Gladbrook Rhinebeck, very good team. Very impressed by them. Bedford, probably the biggest surprise of the year that nobody saw coming. They come in at number 3. I'm glad they're getting this respect. They're a very talented team. That win over Lennox, who is also in the top 10 here when we get to it. Very impressive. I really like this Bedford team. Cam and Speaker leading the helm. Cam is at number 4. I like this. Good offense, good rushing attack. I like them at 4. Remsen at number 5 is going to get a couple people upset, but I think the committee has reason to have their doubts a little bit. They're a very young team. They're not what they were last year. I know they have the longest winning streak in the state at 18, them and a couple other teams, but I like it. I think it's fair until they start showing, get some things straightened out. They got a big game this week against Arwevo. We'll talk about that later in the podcast. I think Remsen's good. There's no doubt in my mind they're good. I mean, they've clearly regained all that momentum that they had, but for forward, they just have their doubts. Beat Boyer Valley 12-7. That'll get people a little, like, what's going on here? Very good spot. Don Bosco at 6, only losses to Gladbrook Rhinebeck. I'd say that's pretty good. Central City at number 7, only losses to Winfield Mount Union. I'm kind of surprised they didn't flip these, maybe, because if you're going by who they lost to, wouldn't you put Central City at 6 and Don Bosco at 7? I don't know. Doesn't matter. It's a coin flip. Lennox, ironically, right there as well. Lennox's only loss, Bedford. Lennox is at number 8. Clarksville, who is undefeated and just ran through Turkey Valley, is at number 9. We'll talk about Clarksville a little bit. We got a question about Clarksville, so I'll get to them in a little bit. But Clarksville is at number 9, despite being undefeated. And then Waco is at number 10. They lost to Winfield Mount Union. So there's your rankings. I think they're good. I'm excited to see the RPI. The RPI obviously isn't a committee. The RPI is numbers, who you beat, who you haven't beat. We'll talk about the RPI in a second because I have a weird feeling that we might have a very big surprise at the number 1 position in one of the classes. We'll talk about it here in a second. But we are off to our questions. Thanks to everyone who submitted questions on Instagram, all the hot takes, everything else. One person even, his question's in here. His question was so dang long, he DM'd us and was like, I'll just DM you the question. So we'll get started here. I have a couple statistical backgrounds because I don't have Paul with me that can pull up Bound. because I have StreamYard pulled up, it'll really lag my computer if I try to like pull up anything else, and our Bound runs advertisements, obviously on the webpage. So I had to do all this preset, but it's been a busy evening. I was at Waukee calling volleyball this evening. I've been everywhere, but I'm excited to get into these questions. Everybody, I love the interaction. I love it. We'll start with Patrick Shaw. He has a prediction. He says Belle Plain will beat Montezuma. This isn't really a hot take. It's not really a crazy hot take. I just wanted to talk about Belle Plain a little bit. This Belle Plain team is 3-2. Their only losses are to Clarksville, 34-32, and Moravia, 53-46. If you're keeping track at home, those are two very good losses. Moravia, another team, by the way, that got left out of the top 10. That I don't think it's a I'm not shocked, but I was like, you could have fit him in if you wanted to. Those are two very good losses for Belle Plain. They are led by Ty Alcott, 18 of 32 passing, 308 yards, 6 touchdowns. Oh, by the way, he's also run for 662 yards and 9 touchdowns. This is a Belle Plain team that loves to run the ball, almost close to 1,500 yards rushing. Their losses are good losses, if you will. I mean, 2 points to Clarksville. That's phenomenal. Moravia, a high-scoring team, held with them, only 53-46. Montezuma's 3-3 on the year. Brady Bolton is just a sophomore, and we have to remember that. Montezuma will be good. Give it 1 year, 2 years, Montezuma will be right back to the top. I'll go with you, Patrick. I think Belle Plain will beat Montezuma. And I love this because I have become bulletin board material for a lot of these teams. And we've discussed this before. Everybody that listens to this podcast thinks we hate them. So therefore, it is what it is. I'll talk about that when we get to our upset predictions of the week, running back on last week. Patrick, thanks for the question. I agree with you. I think Belle Plain will beat Montezuma. I love Montezuma. Don't get me wrong. I'm a Grinnell guy. Love Montezuma. Love BGM. Love North Mahaska. I love all those surrounding schools. I think they're great. Belle Plain, you're not as close, but you're closer. Campbell.Karsten 07. He says Carlisle will upset Gilbert. I wanted to listen to you out on this, Campbell, because I was like, all right, I'll take a jab. A lot of the undefeated teams this week, a lot of people commented and said they're going to get upset this week, which everybody's swinging for the fences. I took a liberty and listened to a couple of them. I wanted to listen to this Carlisle one, though, because I don't hate it. But then I looked at the stats. Carlisle's 1-4 on the season. Their only win is against Indianola. What a weird win. They face a Gilbert team that is 5-0. Granted, has not played the toughest schedule, but, Will Hawthorne, he's a dog. He's leading the team. The thing that worries about me to Carlisle is they turn the ball over. 7 interceptions this year. They've only thrown 1 touchdown pass. Gilbert has picked off opponents 5 times this year. They're a ball hawking defense. They love to force fumbles. Caleb Nordhagen has to step up for Carlisle in the passing or in the rushing and receiving attack. If they do that, I think it could get interesting. But I think Gilbert still wins. I still think Gilbert wins. Gilbert will go into next week undefeated against Bondurant. Gilbert has 2 more big tests, in my opinion. They got Bondurant and they got Pella left. And I'm pretty high on a Pella team. So will Gilbert make the playoffs? Yes, they'll make the playoffs. I think they're almost a guarantee now. You win this week, 6 wins. I don't see how you don't make it at 6-2, 7-2. Even if you lose 6-3. I think Gilbert gets past Carlisle, but I'll give you the doubt, Campbell. I think this thing's close, but I don't think Carlisle upsets Campbell or upsets Gilbert. See, here's the thing. I say these things, and then Carlisle players will listen to this and be like, well, he doesn't believe in us. We're going to go out there and win the thing. And then if they do win, then I don't hear the rest of it, or I don't hear the end of it. So, that's what happens when you put your face out there and your words out there, but I'll take it. Good luck to Carlisle. Good luck to Gilbert. Fun teams out of the Raccoon River Conference. O_Thompson13 asks, is Hudson legit? Is Hudson a legit 1A contender? Well, they're not ranked. That is one thing. Here's my take on Hudson. They are 4-1. They almost had our game of the week a couple weeks ago. I can't remember what it was for. I really wanted to do it for them because I just like throwing in new teams in there. 4-1 record. Their wins are over North Tama, Cascade, Jessup, and Albernet, so not a great win percentage of those teams combined. They lost to Columbus Catholic, who is a decent team. Camden Davis has been really good for Hudson, but statistically, nothing really jumps off the page for me. It's just not, there's nothing crazy. Also, here's your schedule the rest of the way. East Marshall this week should win that game. South Hardin won't be as easy. They play Grundy Center this week. Grundy Center will probably beat them, so should be 3-3 when you face them. And then you finish the season with Grundy Center. So I'm going to put a pin in this question. And are they a legit 1A contender? I think they're a contender. I think they're going to make the playoffs. But get back to me after the Grundy Center game, and I'll tell you if they're a 1A contender. Depending on how they hold their ground against that Spartan team, we'll talk. But I like the question. I do want to give Hudson, I want to give the Pirates their flowers. I think they've been phenomenal. I think it's a great start to the season. I know they wish they could have had that Columbus Catholic game back, but it's good to see this team up and running. I always think of Hudson as a soccer school, and I'm probably not wild to think that, but very good to see them putting things together on the gridiron. Again, get back to me after the Grundy Center game. We'll see what happens. Jake.Fink2 says Denison Schleswig will make the playoffs for the first time since 2009. That's insane that it's been this long, but the Monarchs are getting close. And Jake, I think you're right. I think they will make it. They have wins over they have wins over Council Bluffs Jefferson. I swear it's not Wednesday morning. It's still Tuesday night when I'm recording this. They have wins over Council Bluffs, Jefferson, Carroll, and Fort Dodge. That Carroll win's pretty good. Their losses are to Glenwood and Harlan. Not bad losses. They have Spencer, Storm Lake, Lamar's, Sioux City West left. I really could see their only loss coming to Lamar's. Spencer just has not been the team that they've been in the past. Storm Lake has a good passing attack. I'll give you that. Could be an interesting game. Lamar's just got beat by Mock Floyd Valley. They're still a good team, I think. And Sioux City West. Don't know much about Sioux City West, but I don't think they're great. Luke Wiebers has been very good at quarterback. 681 yards, 6 touchdowns. He's ran for 164 yards and 2 touchdowns. That would put them at, the way I see it, 7-2, 6-3. You have good losses. And I'm very curious to see with the RPI next week how much we value the losses and how much the RPI values the losses. Paul and I will have a lot to talk about next week. Let's just say the RPI will give us a lot of talking points. I just think based on previous past, 5-4, yeah, we've seen some 5-4 teams not make it. But 6-3, like 6-3 usually gets you in. And I don't think Denison goes 6-3. I think Denison could win out and go 7-2. So yes, I think the Monarchs will break the streak and go to the playoffs for the first time since 2009. Jake, I like the way you're thinking. I'm with you, man. I think this is a good year for Denison. They're not the best team by any means, but they're a good enough team that they're going to make the playoffs. And I think that should be a standard for every program. I guarantee at the top of every program's list is make the playoffs. I'm sure win a state championship's in there, and they have goals, but making the playoffs has to be that first goal. I think Denison gets there, and I'm happy for the Monarchs. What a great name. I love their logo, too. I like how it says Monarchs in the logo. I'm a nerd about that stuff. But, Jake, love the question. Not really a question. Love the prediction. Go Monarchs. Josh Lear, 24, pretty much just asked about Lake Mills. So I just put Lake Mills. Let's talk about Lake Mills. We have not talked about Lake Mills, at least in my opinion. I don't think we've talked about him at all. Lake Mills is 5-0. You probably didn't even know Lake Mills is 5-0. They're a good basketball school. Have played Granby Christian a lot in the past when it comes to state championships. Speaking about Granby Christian, man, how about that? Requesting to move up a class. When's the last time that's happened? It's not bound to talk basketball, but you know Paul and I will be talking about Granby Christian moving up a class and requesting to move up a class in basketball. Anyway, Lake Mills is 5-0. Their team has, listen to this stat, they have 94 passing yards on the entire season. So 94 passing yards in 5 games. And they've run for 1,458 yards. I get it. You can run well, and you can pass not great, or you can pass great, run not well. But 94 passing yards has me a little concerned, just a little bit. Logan Bacon, great on the ground. 38 carries, 490 yards, 6 touchdowns. Their opponent record, not good. 16-24 opponent record. Just has not been great on their side. Granted, you can't control their schedule. What really gets me about Lake Mills is we're going to figure out who they are because they have Bellman Clemmy this week, which could give them a tough test. I'm not saying they won't. And then to finish the year, they get West Hancock and St. Ansgar. So Lake Mills, buckle up. We'll figure out what you're made out of. You face the number 1 and number 3 teams in the next 2 weeks or in the next 3 weeks. They're going to make the playoffs. I think what? They'll go 6-2. 5-3 might push it. I'm just saying, might push it, but could go 6-2 because it's only 8 games this year. So I don't know. I like this Lake Mills team. I think it's great what they're doing, but I don't think they're a championship contender, but they're going to make the playoffs, and I'm really happy for them. We'll see how they shape up against West Hancock and St. Ansgar, but I don't know. It's just a good story. Happy for Lake Mills going the rest of the way. We'll see what happens. Morris.John 10. This is a really good question. Well, it's not really a question, but he says a hot take. He says there shouldn't be anybody ranked above CIML teams. I took that as nobody should be ranked above Southeast Polk and Dowling Catholic. So I did some research. And this research probably will get me so many people coming at me being like, well, eye test. Yes, the eye test is a huge part of this. But the eye test doesn't look at the RPI. This is what I'm looking at, and this is what I'm thinking is I'm going to go with a hot take. Bettendorf, if they win this week, Bettendorf will be the number 1 team in the RPI. And that is going to make so many people mad. But I just have a feeling, and here's where you're going to hear me out. Let's look at Dowling, or let's look at what people would assume. Let's go how the rankings are thought of. Southeast Polk, in many people's minds, and in my mind, I will say, in my mind, is the number 1 team in Class 5A. By far. They are 5-0 on the season. Great. They've won 8 straight games. They won 2 straight titles. They look great. Here's where we get interesting. Their opponent record is 17-18. Not great. Not great. Their best win over Ankeny, who was 3-2. Valley, not a good win. Cedar Rapids Prairie, all right win, not a great win. Sioux City East, not a great win. Just going down the line. It gets tough. The good thing is it helps them here in the next couple of weeks. They get Johnston this week. Johnston technically not great either in terms of opponent record because they're 2-3. But then you get Waukee and then you get Dowling. So, okay, that's going to really help you boost it up. What we're talking about right now, I guess. So, yeah, interesting about Southeast Polk. Let's go with the number 2 team that everybody's saying is number 2. And guess what? I agree. They're number 2. Dowling Catholic, 5-0 record on the season. Their opponent record, 18-22. Interesting. So only 1 better game than Southeast Polk in terms of the win column. Dowling's best win, you guessed it, the Ankeny Hawks at 3-2. Very, very, very interesting. Imagine if Ankeny didn't beat Iowa City West this past week. Then technically, I guess Prairie's win would be, or Southeast Polk's best win would be over Prairie, who was 3-2, and Dowling's best win would be over Waukee Northwest at 3-2. So, not great, but it's not outstanding. And I get it. You guys are totally going to be telling me you're like, eye test. Who cares? They're the top 2 teams. I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying here's what stats are saying. And let's listen to Bettendorf. Bettendorf is 5-0. Their opponent record, 24-21. So the only positive opponent record of those teams. Bettendorf's best win, Pleasant Valley, who is 4-1. Who, oh, by the way, in our power index, which in some ways is close to the RPI, is number 4 behind Dowling, Southeast Polk, Bettendorf. Bettendorf is number 1 in our power index, if you hadn't guessed. So should anybody be ranked above the CIML schools? Eye test wise, no. Statistically, yes. Statistics say Bettendorf should be the number 1 team in Class 5A. Is that going to happen? Maybe. I'll take a guess and say it is. I think when the RPI comes out, if everybody holds serve this week, Dowling will have a win over Centennial, which is better. But technically, it'll be over a 3-3 Centennial team if Dowling wins. Ankeny has the win over Dowling, or Ankeny has the win over Centennial. So technically, Ankeny is still the better win. If Ankeny wins this week, it'll be 4-2. We move on. Not saying Ankeny's a bad team. Ankeny's a great team. But PV is still a better win for Bettendorf. I don't know. I'm really losing my thoughts now. But that's all I'm going to say. I think I'm not disagreeing that there shouldn't be anyone over the CIML teams, but I wanted to give benefit of the doubt to Bettendorf because statistically, they should be statistically. That's just what you're looking at in terms of opponents, who you faced, and that's a lot of what the RPI is. It's who you faced, who your opponents have faced. So I don't know. We'll see what happens, but Bettendorf is right there, man, and I get it. Eye test wise, Southeast Polk is the best team. Dowling's right behind him, and then Bettendorf's at third. I get it. Could Ankeny beat Bettendorf right now? That'd be a very good game. I'm not going to say who would win that, but I'm just saying what the RPI should say. So we'll see what happens. Great question. I'd love it if Paul were here to debate me because I'm sure he'd say Bettendorf shouldn't be there, but I'm just going off stats. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts about it. Just let me know. Speaking of Southeast Polk, we got another hot take. Joshua Anglo from Johnston says Johnston's going to upset Southeast Polk. I am really excited for this game. I get to call this game on Friday. I'll beat Southeast Polk for the Central Iowa Sports Network. I got a lot of Southeast Polk the upcoming weeks. I get Southeast Polk this week. Then I go to Waukee and call their game against Waukee with Dar Danielson. And then, ironically, I get to call Southeast Polk Dowling in a couple weeks. And my dad gets to come out and call that game with me. Very excited for that. That'll be really cool. Make sure to watch the Central Iowa Sports Network. We got a lot of stuff planned for that game. Anyway, I don't hate this pick, but I'm not picking against Southeast Polk. Johnston is... Here's the thing. Johnston defensively is very good. I'd put them up there in the top 5 in terms of defense in the state. That Cedar Falls game was a really weird anomaly. But other than that, they're not giving up a ton. They gave up 16 to Ankeny, gave up 14. Technically only gave up 7 to Waukee when you think about it. But I'm going to go back to what has cost Johnston in games this year is the turnovers. You cannot turn the ball over. Will Nuss is a phenomenal quarterback. I'm not doubting Will Nuss's arm strength. I'm not doubting his accuracy because he is an unbelievable quarterback. He's one of the better in the state. But the turnovers have just been an issue. And I'm sure he'd tell you the same thing. I guarantee he'd tell you the same thing. The fumble cost Johnston the game on Friday night. Johnston was going to beat Waukee, and Waukee just got a break. Nuss was going down, just let go of the ball, trying to drain out the clock. Waukee takes it back for 6. That's also another thing. What are the chances you get a lucky break and it bounces your right way and you take it back for 6? I think Johnston's defense can keep them in this game. But part of me thinks Johnston, we're just waiting. When's that offense going to explode, man? They got weapons. When is it going to explode? They got a chance. I'm not saying they're going to upset Southeast Polk, but I think the chance is there that if everything goes right, you can win the day and catch them when they're down. But Southeast Polk will be ready. And Southeast Polk's not stupid. They beat Johnston at the Dome last year. So Johnston's been thinking about this for almost a year. So it's not like they're going to come in flat-footed. But the loss to Waukee definitely took a lot of wind out of your sails. If they would have beaten Waukee last week, then yes, I would have been all for it. I'm like, yeah, Johnston over Southeast Polk. I'll take it. But the loss to Waukee, albeit, I know, lost on a fumble, just kind of a weird situation. I like... Joshua, I think I love the pick. I just think Southeast Polk takes care of business, but I'm not putting it past the Dragons. And no, don't use this as bulletin board material. I think Johnston's a phenomenal team. I wouldn't be surprised if they beat them. I just like Southeast Polk a little bit more, but I guarantee a lot of people are with you that Johnston could be a popular upset pick this week. But Southeast Polk has been picked against so many times, and it's just never worked. So we'll see what happens. Thanks for the question. Good luck to the Dragons. Glans Bennett, he says, West Delaware is the most underrated team in Class 3A. It's very ironic because immediately after this question, someone asked a question, who's the most underrated team in Class 3A? And I'll tell you, it's West Delaware. 3-2 record for the Hawks. They have Center Point Urbana, Wahlert Catholic, Independence, and Central DeWitt to finish. I think Independence will be that toughest matchup. They're going to get in. They're going to go to the playoffs at 6-3 or 7-2. Brent Yankovic, I've talked about him before. He's crazy. 661 yards in the air, 618 yards on the ground. And he has 15 touchdowns this year. It's exactly what you want out of your quarterback. That win over Webster City, good turning point. I will say Webster City's, slipping just a little bit, but I still think they're a phenomenal team. I'm not going to put that past them. Yeah, I'll go with it. West Delaware is the most underrated team in Class 3A. I fully agree. They have a good schedule the rest of the way. The loss to Western Dubuque was tough, 61-27. That's a good Western Dubuque team. But yeah, I'll roll with it. I think the Hawks are the most underrated team in Class 3A. Thanks for the question. Thanks for the hot take, whatever. Levi Campman. Is Clarksville a contender or a pretender? I love that. Like state. Contender or pretender? Pretender. Contender. Here's the thing about Clarksville. Just a couple quick things. They're very good. They run the ball insanely well. Insanely well. Just handled a pretty good Turkey Valley team last week. Their opponent record is 21-23. I know it's not all about the opponent record. That's not a bad opponent record by any means. The biggest thing, I'll put another pin in this question. They get Gladbrook Rhinebeck in a couple weeks. Then we'll know. I think that'll be a phenomenal game. You get a very good passing attack against a very good rushing attack. I think that defense will be the best defense they faced all year. We'll figure it out. Right now, I'd say they're contenders. I think the whole top 10 of class of 8 players is a contender. Let's be honest. But we'll get really into it, and we'll figure that out here in a couple weeks. Got a fun game against Gladbrook Rhinebeck upcoming. Again, I like what Clarksville's doing. I think they're a phenomenal team. They run the ball really well. But we'll see what happens. DMI Rome. When will an Eastern Iowa team win the 5A title? And then after it, he says, my guess isn't very soon. Well, DMI Rome, I don't think you're way off, but I can see where you're thinking not very soon. The Class 5A title used to be 4A until a couple years ago. Has been heavily dominated by Central Iowa. The CIML, pretty much the same 3-4 teams. I'm going to let the audience that is listening take a guess. When do you think the last time a Eastern Iowa team won? I'll give you 5 seconds. All right, time's up. It was Iowa City High in 2009 was the last time it happened. 14 years ago was the last time that a Eastern Iowa team won the title. And it was a norm back in the 2000s because Bettendorf won it in 2007 and Cedar Rapids Xavier won it in 2006. Very good teams. Very tough, physical teams. Brutal teams. Valley, Dowling were the top class. Every other year in 2000, it was usually Valley, and then Dowling won in 2001 and 2001. But ever since then, it's been Dowling, and it's been Ankeny, and it's been Southeast Polk. And that's it. Valley thrown in there. When will they win again? It's tough, man. The thing is that they've gotten close. Like, they get teams to Eastern. Like, Eastern Iowa gets teams to the Dome. There's no problem in that. Yeah, there's been a couple years. But the problem is when they get to the Dome, it just feels like they're not competitive. In the last couple of years, at least. I think of Pleasant Valley getting there. I think of Iowa City High getting there. I think of Bettendorf getting there recently. It just hasn't been close. Like, the Des Moines schools have just run over top of them. And I don't know. It's we can take guesses why we know or why this happens. Is it because the metro is bigger? Technically, yes, but not by much. Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, Coralville, Tiffin area, up into Marion. That's a big area. I mean, it covers technically more area than Des Moines area does, but there's more people in Des Moines. Are there better opportunities in Des Moines? Are there better AAU teams in Des Moines? Are there better, I don't know, do the coaches want to go? Do the good coaches want to go to Des Moines? I can't say that's a thing because Des Moines Roosevelt's coach took the job out of Iowa City High a couple of years ago. So I don't know, man. I really don't know. I'm sure there's more reasons deep down, but off the surface, it's just different. And people are going to be so mad at me for saying that, but I think of it. I hate the whole SEC thing. I hate the SEC. But the motto at the SEC is it's just different down there. It's just different down there. Here's how I look at it. It used to be different out east. I think of when I granted, I was only like 0 to 10 years old around that time. But I've gone back and read a lot about the younger teams or the teams in the 2000s. From my understanding, back then in the 2000s, it was flipped. We thought of Eastern Iowa from the Metro side. We're like, man, it's just different out there. They're just bigger. They're faster. They're stronger. You got athletes that are crazy. You got Tim Dwight. I know it wasn't 2000s, but you got Tim Dwight. You got all these crazy, crazy athletes out there. You got, Greenway, all these guys that are just dogs. And then it's just not what it used to be. And this may sound crazy, but, back then it was like, it was just my favorite state champion teams are the guys that you're just like, it's just a bunch of guys that came together, who lived together, worked together their whole lives, and had one goal: win a state championship. I always think back to the Iowa High School Athletic Association when they always play the Farm Bureau ad. I think they do it for the girls' union too. And they're like, it's a chance where a small town kid can make it big. And I always laugh about that nowadays because, yes, small town teams once in a while get it done. And it's awesome when they do. But there's not many small town kids anymore, man. Like, we're getting bigger. The Metro is getting bigger. I'm not saying that Eastern Iowa isn't getting bigger either, but it is definitely interesting that I think of it back then. I'm like, you think of Bettendorf, you think of Iowa City High, like these guys are out on the farm every day, man. They're working. The weight rooms were different. The coaching was different. It's just, I look at the Metro now as the SEC. It's just different. I'm not saying it means more, but there's just something. There's something different about the Metro. But I'm not giving up hope on Eastern Iowa because in terms of other sports, Eastern Iowa is the Mecca. Volleyball, Eastern Iowa. I know there's been a couple CIML teams, but across the board, Eastern Iowa is the way to go. Basketball, they're getting there. Same thing. Pleasant Valley, I mean, seriously, phenomenal team. Basketball champions in girls. Phenomenal. It's great to see. So they're good in some sports, but I get it. Football just has not been kind to them. But times are changing, man. Gary Swenson up at Valley, close to retirement soon. Tom Wilson's got plenty of years left, but he's getting older. The youth moves in. It's just, where does the youth want to go? Does the youth want to go to Eastern Iowa? I'm talking about coaching. Does the youth go to Eastern Iowa or does the youth go to the Metro? In a way, players are the same thing. Do players, I hate to say it, transferring? Do you want to go play out east or do you want to go play for the big schools in Des Moines? It's just kind of how it is. It's weird. I get it. But it's just different in the Metro right now, at least. So going back to your question, when will an Eastern Iowa team and the team win a 5A title? I say it happens once in the next 10 years. And because of that, you just get your random one-offs. I just feel like, you never know. One team might just figure it out. Is it normal for all the 5A schools here in the Metro just to all have off years? No. Dowling will always be good. Southeast Polk looks like they're always going to be good. Valley is in a very interesting spot. Ankeny might be in a very interesting spot. Centennial's still waiting to take that big next leap. Waukee and Waukee Northwest are getting better every single year, it feels like. And there's going to be more schools. Ankeny will probably have another school. Waukee will probably have another school, and then we wait and see. But in terms of Eastern Iowa, I give them one time in the next 10 years. I'm not going to say what it is because I don't know. I just think there's no way it won't get to a 20-year drought. I'll give you that. It won't get to a 20-year drought. But I don't think it's this year. I don't think it's next year. So I love the question. I know a lot of people probably don't like what I said, but that's just how I look at it. It's an opinion of mine. I'd love to hear your answers. I'd love to just, sit down and chat about it. I hope my dad calls me about this question because he's called me about questions before. I love chatting with him about this. But I don't know. It's just different. But it used to be different back then for the other side. Times change, man. It's currently the era of the Metro schools. Last question. Braden Manui, whatever. Something like that. Sorry, Braden. If the state champion for each class had a tournament, could the smaller schools upset the big schools? We kind of talked about this a couple weeks ago. I'm going to make this very short and sweet. Nobody's ever beating a 5A school. I don't think the 4A champion would beat the 5A champion ever. I'm sorry. It's just how it goes. The depth, I get it. Depth is still good in 4A. I don't think a 4A champion could ever beat a 5A champion. Could a 3A champion beat a 4A champion? Yes, we've seen it happen before. Harlan's done it to Lewis Central. It's happened. That can happen. Could a 2A team beat a 4A team? No. I'm going to say no. I think it's possible. I don't think it can happen. It's possible, but I don't think it happens. Could a 2A team beat a 3A team? Sure. Could a 1A team beat a 3A team? Sure. Maybe. Don't know. I think you could, as long as it's not 4A to 5A, the team 2A could always beat 3A, 1A could always beat 2A, A could always beat 1A. But I don't think you could ever jump. I don't think an A champion could defeat a 2A champion. I don't think a 1A champion could ever defeat a 3A champion. I don't think a 2A champion could ever beat a 4A champion. That's just kind of how I see it. Now, Van Meter will go out, prove me wrong sometimes with non-conference schedules. That's just how I feel. 8-player, I'm sorry. That is an interesting question. Could an 8-player team, if they're full health, didn't have stamina, could an 8-player team beat a Class A team? Maybe. There's been a lot of good 8-player teams. That Remsen team last year, I don't know. You could put them against a couple of 8 teams. You never know. But I would say I don't think we'd see many major upsets. I think it's just how I explained it. Good question, Braden. You were the one that DM'd us because your question was so long. But I shortened it a little bit. Thanks for your input. That was our questions and hot takes and predictions this week. A lot of good stuff. I wish Paul was here to chat up more about it, but I hope my answers didn't make too many people mad. I'm sure they did. Again, I would love to hear what you guys have to say. DM me personally, DM the Twitter account, something. I'd just love to hear what you guys have to say. Because they're great questions and they're really good open-ended questions. And me just talking to myself isn't very good when it comes to that stuff. It's time for our upset prediction of the week. Wanted to throw this in. Last week did not go well for me. I picked Waterloo West over Waukee Northwest. The thing is, I always have to laugh because I tweeted out Waterloo West hadn't won a game against a metro school since ever. And last time they beat a CIML school was 1991 against Newton at the Dome. And on Twitter, I said they had a decent chance. And basically on the pod, I was like, you know what? Let's throw it out there. Sure. Let's beat them. And then Northwest took it personally. I had 2 players DM me. One guy said I should be fired. I was like, okay, you don't have to come at me like that. But it's all in good fun. But it is kind of weird to get those messages. I'm like, okay, good to see. But anyway, yeah, that's just kind of how it goes. Trust me, if I pick a team to upset another team, the team that I pick against, I don't hate you. I love all these guys. I love all these teams. Y'all are playing football. I didn't play football in high school. You are doing so much better than I am. Just a prediction. But I appreciate the bulletin board material as it is. So my upset prediction of the week, I'm going to go with a team that lost last week. I think they get back on track. I'm going to go with Arweva over Remsen St. Mary's. I know. Shocker. Remsen slipped just a little bit against Boyer Valley. I know they took care of business against New Alfonda. I think Arweva down team. I like Wyatt Regaler. I think, very good on the ground, 463 yards and 6 touchdowns, and then 449 yards and 6 touchdowns. I think he has a lot of potential. So give it to me. Arweva takes down Remsen St. Mary's. I'm sure Remsen will totally clap back at me on social media, but Remsen, you guys are great. Really good team. Really fun to watch. I just think this is what I think. Go Arweva. Go Remsen St. Mary's. Hope everyone has a good, safe week of football. That is all I got for this episode of Bound to Talk Football. The connection, for some reason, is being very buggy at the end, so of course it's going down at the end. But I appreciate everyone for listening and watching. Paul and I will be back on Friday for our preview. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the questions and hot takes. Keep submitting them more, and let me know what you guys think. I will see you guys on Friday. Thanks for listening to Bound to Talk Football. See you later.